Okay. Sorry about that. Now I'm ready again.
You're like cutting out now.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, cool. Great. So you're looking in the camera. Okay. It's not a new concept. Americans sometimes move from one state to another to avoid high taxes, and some even renounce their citizenship altogether. But now Puerto Rico, a U.S. Commonwealth, is suggesting through advertisements that you can move there, avoid taxes, and not have to kiss your passport goodbye. Of course, this is a topic we have to ask tax attorney Rob Wood of Wood LLP about. So Rob, thanks for being here. Is this too good to be true?
I think it depends on, I guess it depends on your definition. I will say that over the course of the last, it's really been a couple of years now, I've gotten hundreds of queries, emails and phone calls from people who express a desire to move to Puerto Rico because the tax rates, if you qualify for this special deal, are virtually non-existent. I mean, it's, and as you say, unlike something that people view as drastic, giving up a U.S. passport, which is after all valuable, and there are issues of a lot more than taxes involved. But Puerto Rico, or any possession, U.S. possession, doesn't involve that, so people view it as less drastic. It's a bit, I suppose, a more extreme version of a Californian moving to Nevada or Texas or Washington State, a non-state income tax state. So Puerto Rico looks awfully attractive. So I would say a couple of observations. Out of the hundreds of people that I've had ask me about this, I don't know of any, in my experience, who've actually moved. And my experience may be unusual, but the reason I say that is that Puerto Rico's rules are designed for Puerto Rico source income and for income that you earn after you get there, after you move. And apart from things like people actually have to move and be there for at least 183 days, essentially more than half the year, many people somehow think that they don't have to actually move, or that they can move and be there briefly and mostly be traveling or something else, which doesn't work. But I think the main thing is this point about income after you arrive there. So in my experience, many people who move want to realize big gains from somewhere else. So they have huge gains in the stock market that they haven't triggered the gain yet, but they've got highly appreciated stock now. They want to move there and then sell it. Or they have highly appreciated crypto, like Bitcoin or something. Same thing. And my belief after reading the rules is that doesn't work, meaning you're still taxed in the US if they catch you. And so I think people are, and essentially you have to wait 10 years after you move to Puerto Rico in order to insulate yourself from all that pre-move appreciation. So my experience is that once people hear that, they suddenly are not interested in moving.
Okay. Well, then this is a good opportunity, and we've talked about this before, but just address, are there ways for people to avoid high taxes, especially like in California with property taxes, or any federal type taxes that they've decided they don't really want to pay anymore?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a simple subject, of course, but I think the move thing, I guess just to go back to that, and since I mentioned, for example, a Californian, that might be a person in New York State, really any state. I guess I focus on the states with the highest taxes, but most states, except for a handful, most states have a state income tax. So, I mean, I guess fundamentally you could say, is it possible to have a share of stock in a public company, for example, that is highly appreciated, and to then move from California to Texas, let's say, before you sell and then sell? And the answer is yes, that is generally possible. So, I mean, you might, if the position is significant enough, you might have big appreciation and avoid California taxing that example. So I think because of that, people might, and that same would be true, by the way, with cryptocurrency. I think because of that, people might think about Puerto Rico and think the rules work the same way. But I guess a couple of points of caution. One, you actually have to move, which is obvious. And two, states like California and New York are not stupid. And they're going to look at, or they may look at what you did, and they may look at the timing of it. And they may look at your remaining connections in a place like that you left, like California. And so having seen a lot of residency disputes over the years with California and other states, I find that it's usually, I mean, any dispute with taxes takes sometimes years to come about and to resolve. And so you've got all of that sort of experience to look at and say, well, you know, where am I 3 years later? And, you know, California might not say that you actually didn't move. They might in fact agree with you that you're now a Texas resident. But you may say that you moved in March of a particular year, and California may look at the facts and say, no, we think you moved in July of that year. And that may be enough, depending on how quickly you sell whatever it is after you move, that may be enough to capture that gain. So I've seen that happen time and time again. So I think the main, well, one topic is, you know, be realistic about your facts, and also get some professional advice about what you're doing so that you don't end up in that kind of a trap. So that's only state taxes, but again, a complex topic of, you know, what people do when they have big gains they might realize, and it's worth it to get some professional advice.
Okay, thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay.
So if I just keep rolling, is that okay, and you can separate them later?
Yeah, I was thinking so that you don't always have to get up and
Okay,
turn
great.
it off, and then whoever is helping you out has to load 3 different videos, so.
Okay, good.
Okay, so now we're going to the gig economy employee independent contractor discussion. Okay, so you're Darren?
Yep.
A new
Go ahead.
California law could force gig economy companies like Uber and Lyft to treat their workers as employees, not as independent contractors. The new law is scheduled to go into effect January 1st. It will require employers to consider the workers employees if a company controls how workers perform their tasks, or if their work is part of a company's regular business. Our guest, Rob Wood of Wood LLP in San Francisco, is here to talk with us about the bill and why it matters from a tax perspective. So, Rob, I understand Uber has already announced that despite the bill, they will treat their employees as independent contractors, so not as employees as the law has said. So why does that matter to Uber, to make sure that they are, in fact, independent contractors?
Yeah, well, I'd say, I mean, I think, I mean, it's been an interesting development to watch, and I think it's going to, my prediction is it's going to take years before we really know how this is going to come out. I mean, as to why a company like Uber or Lyft is another good example. Many so-called gig economy companies, why they care. I think the costs, and it's I think about taxes, of course, but it's not merely about taxes. The costs of having employees is simply so much greater than having independent contractors. I mean, so some sort of fundamentals. When you have an independent contractor who does something and you owe them $100, you pay them $100, and that's sort of the end of it. And yes, you have some tax obligations. You're obligated to, if the payment during the course of a year is over $600, the business is obligated to send them an IRS 1099 form, once a year. But that's not a big deal, and that's really it. In contrast with employees, you have to withhold taxes, and you have to send the taxes to the IRS and the state. And that's not just income taxes, it's employment tax, so social security tax, for example, and federal unemployment tax. I mean, it's kind of a big deal, it's a big obligation, and it actually costs the employer a lot to do that. The employer even incurs some of those taxes on the employer side, and of course some on the employee side. So it's a big deal, and that's only the tax side. On the if you look at the sort of labor and employment consequences, most of the state and federal sort of non-discrimination rules and the many rules regulating the employment and the workplace that apply to employees and not to contractors. So again, the cost of getting rid of an independent contractor is typically very small compared to what can be an enormous cost of getting rid of employees or having disputes with employees. So I'd say, I mean, why do companies care? A company like Uber, at least as I understand it, was essentially built on the concept that it could avoid all those costs. And I'd say most of these so-called gig companies are the same way. So I think they care a lot. I think they care a huge amount, and there are huge dollars at stake, not just about taxes. So I think it's going to be a kind of a long fight. But as you say, the bill was written specifically to target companies like this, and because it has compared to, I guess, what you'd call the sort of the old style definitions for how you decide whether somebody's a contractor or an employee. I mean, this new California law is vastly broader, and it's going to grab up an awful lot more people, and there are going to be fights about it.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, but then going back to our previous discussion, or what I was addressing at the beginning of this conversation, how does Uber, they've announced that despite the bill, they will still treat the employees as independent contractors. So how are they going to get around the law then?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but I understand. I know just what has been said publicly, what Uber has said. And I mean, I think it is exactly the argument that you would expect. And that is, I mean, as you said, the fundamentally, the new law essentially says, we're going to make it really simple. And you've got to treat people as employees if either, it's kind of an either or test, if either you control them in what they do. That's an old school test going back decades, generations even. Kind of the common law is someone is an employee if you tell them what to do, and someone might not be an employee if they have a lot of independence. Basically, to use a silly example, you're contracting for somebody to build you a new deck in your backyard. You're asking them to build a deck, and you don't really care how they build it. I mean, you want it to fit your patio, but beyond that, exactly how they do it and stick it together is up to their sort of professional expertise. So this control factor, if you control somebody and you sort of monitor everything they do, that suggests employment. That's one of the tests. And the big club in the new law is the alternative test, which is you've got to treat people, the law says, as employees if they are working in part of your main business. Sort of, it's part of your main function as a business. So for Uber, I'm sure the California lawmakers who put the bill together, thought, well, this will do it, because it says basically if they are your main business, if their the working is in your main business, they've got to be employees. Uber quickly said, well, wait a minute, our main business isn't driving people around. No, our main business it's not providing rides. Our main business is a tech platform that sort of is a community, and that is our business, and we're hooking people up, we're connecting them through our technology. We're a technology company. We're not a company that is providing rides. So, I mean, in some ways, I suppose both sides are right to an extent, but I think it's inevitable that the courts are going to have to decide.
Okay. So then do you see, let me ask you two questions in one. Do you see other companies following suit to do the same thing as Uber has, made an announcement like that? And do you also think this law will now lead other states, or maybe on a federal level, to be these types of employment bills to be passed or pushed through the legislature?
Yeah, well, I have not, I mean, since the sort of announcement, since Uber actually announced before the bill was even signed, just when it was clear that it was going to be signed. So Uber, I think, sort of upstaged California lawmakers in a way. I don't know if other companies have announced or are investigating. I believe that many will, at least the biggest ones, I think will probably follow Uber's lead. My belief, by the way, is that many smaller companies are not going to follow Uber's lead, and I also think that those smaller companies, if they don't follow Uber's lead, who just kind of don't worry about it, may be the biggest kind of losers in this controversy, because I think they're the sort of companies, the little companies, and I guess even mom and pop businesses, that are going to be caught eventually. It might take some years. And that are not going to have the budget of Uber to fight over something like this. So I think in that sense, it's a real shame that I think a lot of people are, maybe unfairly going to be caught within this. As to what I think is going to happen with other states or federal, I mean, I don't know, but if you look at California as a leader in employment laws, which historically it has been. Many other states have done things that California did first. So, I mean, I suspect that there will be some of that. I think federal is much harder to predict. I mean, I think, and the federal system is, in some ways, it's number one, the lawmaking system on the federal side is kind of preoccupied with all sorts of political issues these days. So I kind of don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but it will be interesting to see whether other states kind of jump on the bandwagon and follow California's lead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, that should be good.